The cameras flashed. The crowd froze. And just like that, Hollywood had a new obsession. The headline. She did nothing this year. Lisa Kudrow still made millions from Friends.
I mean, it is the ultimate fantasy, right?
It really is. Welcome to Starscope Report. Join Jordan and Jamie as we uncover Hollywood drama, music industry shakeups, and viral influencer scandals. From red carpet surprises to social media controversies, we dive deep into the stories behind the fame.
And today we are doing a deep dive into a number that is, frankly, going to make you reconsider every career choice you have ever made.
For sure. We are talking about $20 million.
Yeah.
That is the figure that just completely swept across the internet in May of 2026. The claim was everywhere, basically saying that Lisa Kudrow and the rest of the core Friends cast each made $20 million this year.
Right. For doing absolutely nothing.
Exactly. No memorizing lines, no grueling 16-hour days under the hot studio lights, no awkward press junkets, just a massive 8-figure check quietly slipping into their bank accounts.
All because of a fictional coffee shop and a sitcom that ended, what, over 2 decades ago?
Yeah, 20 years ago. So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack the real math behind this viral headline. We really want to demystify these complex mechanics of Hollywood residuals.
Because it sounds like magic, but it is actually a highly structured system.
Exactly. And to figure this out, we pulled from a really fascinating stack of sources. We have the recent Times of London interview with Lisa Kudrow, which is kind of where this whole recent frenzy started.
Right. We also have coverage from E! News, Comic Basics, and Media Week, which are all reacting to that interview.
Plus, we dug into a massive financial teardown from Celebrity Net Worth. We pulled the official rulebook on residuals directly from SAG-AFTRA, which is the actors union.
Which is incredibly dense, by the way.
Oh, it is basically a textbook. And later, we are going to look at some really profound legal insights from a Tucson elder law attorney. Because, you know, whether you are negotiating your own salary or parsing through clickbait or just leaving a 90s sitcom on in the background while you fold laundry.
Which we all do.
Right. Understanding the mechanics of how value is continuously monetized is a huge aha moment.
It really is. And if you are loving these Hollywood twists, make sure you are subscribed. We have got even crazier stories ahead.
So let's start with the origin of this viral headline, because the way this $20 million figure became gospel in pop culture is, well, it's a perfect case study in how the media echo chamber operates.
Yeah, let's set the scene.
Yeah.
So Lisa Kudrow, who we obviously all know as Phoebe Buffay, she sits down for this interview with the Times of London.
Right.
And she is actually there to promote the 3rd season of her show, The Comeback. But the interviewer immediately hits her with this really bold premise.
Yeah, they say, everyone knows the 5 surviving cast members earn $20 million a year from repeat fees. Why?
Which is, I mean, that is an incredibly loaded way to ask a question.
Totally.
The interviewer just presents the $20 million as an established, undeniable fact.
Right. And Kudrow gives this perfectly polite, very cheeky deflection. She just smiles and says, because Phoebe Buffay was so great.
I love that response.
It is so good. She doesn't explicitly confirm the number, but she also doesn't deny it. She just gracefully pivots into this really thoughtful reflection on the show's lasting quality.
But of course, in the modern media ecosystem, a cheeky deflection is instantly interpreted as a hard confirmation.
Oh, immediately.
Within hours, outlets like E! News and Comic Basics are running headlines stating that she, quote, seemingly confirms the cast makes $20 million a year.
And Media Week even ran with it for their audience, quoting it at a whopping 27 million Australian dollars annually.
Because the internet does not do nuance. Once that headline is out there, the narrative is completely set.
But let's act as financial detectives here. Because I really want to know where the Times of London even got that 20 million figure in the first place. It didn't just magically appear out of thin air this year.
No, it didn't. And this is where the Celebrity Net Worth teardown is just invaluable. If we trace the actual DNA of this myth, it goes all the way back to a 2015 USA Today article.
Okay, 2015.
Yeah. A reporter was taking a standard Warner Brothers studio tour, and the tour guide just casually claimed that Friends generates $1 billion a year in syndication and that the cast gets a 2% cut.
And, well, 2% of 1 billion is 20 million.
Right. It's clean, it's simple, and it is highly clickable math.
But it is fundamentally flawed. Right.
Oh, completely. It relies on a total misunderstanding of how Hollywood accounting actually functions. To get to the real number, we have to look at the lifetime gross revenue of the show, not just some imaginary flat annual rate.
Okay, so what is the real number?
The total estimated lifetime gross revenue for Friends is around $5.55 billion.
Wow. Wait, 5.55 billion.
Yeah, billion with a B.
That is just a staggering pool of money. Where is that even coming from? Because they haven't made a new episode since 2004.
It comes from a heavily layered cake of distribution deals over decades. You start with the initial local broadcast reruns back in 1998. That pulled in roughly $944 million. Then you layer on the cable syndication dual licensing deals with networks like PBS and Nick at Night.
Which were huge at the time.
Exactly. That is estimated at about $2 billion. Then the streaming era changes the game entirely. You had the initial Netflix deal in 2015 for $218 million.
Right. Everyone was watching it on Netflix.
Yep. And then the mega deal for exclusive streaming rights on Max in 2019, which was $425 million. Add in global licenses in international markets, miscellaneous merchandise deals, and you eventually reach that $5.55 billion summit.
Okay, so the pie is $5.55 billion. The tour guide logic says the cast gets 2% of that. But I know enough about Hollywood contracts to know it is never, ever that simple.
You are spot on, because timing is everything. When Warner Brothers sold those initial rerun rights in 1998,
Right.
that roughly $1 billion local broadcast deal for 236 episodes at $4 million each, the cast did not have a cut of the back end yet.
Wait, really?
Yeah, they had not negotiated their legendary profit-sharing deal at that point.
Wait, let me make sure I'm following this. Because they hadn't signed that specific contract yet. That entire first $1 billion is completely fenced off from the actors.
Exactly. Poof. $1 billion is instantly wiped off the table for the cast.
That is wild.
So that leaves $4.55 billion eligible for their participation.
Yeah.
But we are far from done subtracting, and this is the crucial distinction. The tour guide's math assumed the cast took 2% of gross revenue. Actors almost never get gross.
Right.
They get net profits.
I actually want to use an analogy here to explain this because the difference between gross and net is pretty much the oldest, most notorious trick in the Hollywood playbook.
Oh, 100%.
So imagine you are throwing a massive, highly lucrative neighborhood block party. The gross revenue is all the money you collect at the front gate from ticket sales.
Right.
Looking at that huge pile of cash, you feel incredibly rich.
Yeah.
But the net profit is what is left in the lockbox only after you have paid the DJ, the caterer, the venue rental, the security guards, and like the city permit fees.
That is a great foundation. Yeah. But to make it a true Hollywood analogy, we have to add a layer of complexity.
Okay.
In Hollywood, the studio throwing the block party also happens to own the catering company, the security firm, and the venue.
Ah, so Warner Brothers is basically paying its own subsidiaries.
Exactly.
And they can charge themselves top dollar to make the expenses look as high as physically possible.
Precisely. They use those internal expenses to drain the net profit pool before they ever have to split a single dime with the talent. Celebrity Net Worth estimates a conservative 30% deduction for these overhead costs.
30%, that is a huge chunk.
It is. This includes distribution fees, marketing, residuals paid to the writers and the crew, massive legal expenses, and just general studio overhead.
So let's run the real math here. We take our $4.55 billion, we chop off that 30% for the block party expenses and studio overhead.
Oh.
That leaves us with a net profit tool of roughly $3.185 billion. Now, finally, we can calculate the cast's 2% cut. 2% of $3.185 billion equals $63.7 million.
And we have to be super clear here. That is $63.7 million total per main cast member since the year 2000.
That changes the framing entirely. When you take that $63.7 million and spread it across the 20-plus years the show has been off the air, it averages out to roughly $2.5 to $3 million per year.
Exactly. Not $20 million.
Now, let's be totally honest with each other. $3 million a year for a job you finished 2 decades ago is phenomenal.
Oh, it is life-changing.
It is generational wealth. But it is a very far cry from the $20 million clickbait that sent the internet into a complete frenzy.
Right. And it is also worth noting who did get a massive piece of that pie.
Who?
The creators of the show, Kevin Bright, Marta Kaufman, and David Crane. They owned a collective 23% stake from the very beginning.
Wow.
Because they were owners, they did participate in that first billion-dollar sale. Marta Kaufman and David Crane, who owned 10% each, have made an estimated $385 million each from the back end.
That is mind-boggling. $385 million. But you know, that actually leads me to a really practical question. We know the number is closer to $3 million a year for the actors. But how does that money physically move from a corporate entity like Warner Brothers or a streaming platform into an actor's mailbox?
That is a great question. To understand the plumbing of that money, we have to look at the official advance pay residuals guidelines from SAG-AFTRA, which is the actors union.
Right.
It is a highly systematic, heavily negotiated labyrinth of rules.
Well, let's dig into those rules, because the most fundamental concept here is that residuals only kick in for distribution beyond the initial release.
Yes.
The paycheck you negotiate to just show up on set, hit your marks, deliver your lines, that is your initial compensation. It covers the premiere broadcast. Residuals are strictly the ongoing payments for reuse.
Right. And the timeline of when you actually get paid depends entirely on where the show is airing.
How so?
Well, if a Friends rerun airs on traditional network prime time, the studio has exactly 30 days to pay the actors. It is a very tight turnaround.
But the landscape has completely shifted, right? Network primetime isn't the cash cow it used to be. Everything is on streaming platforms like Max or Netflix. So how does the timeline change there?
It stretches out significantly. For worldwide free television or streaming platforms, the studio has 4 to 6 months after the initial release to pay out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and after that initial window, it switches to a quarterly schedule based on the revenue the show generates. And SAG-AFTRA notes that even after the employers report the revenue, it takes the union about 30 to 60 days just to process the sheer volume of the payments.
I have a major question about that streaming revenue, though. With traditional cable, you have commercial breaks, advertisers pay for slots, so it is very easy to calculate how much money a specific rerun generated.
Right.
But if I am watching Friends on Max, there aren't traditional advertisers in the same way. It is a subscription model.
Oh.
How do they assign a dollar value to a single stream to calculate that quarterly payout?
That is the exact issue that led to those massive industry strikes recently, the streaming black box.
Right.
The formulas are incredibly convoluted. But generally, unions have fought to tie residuals to a mix of the platform's overall subscriber base, the cost of the subscription, and the specific viewership metrics of the show.
So it is just a giant algorithm.
Essentially, yes. It is a complicated algorithm designed to estimate what fraction of a subscriber's monthly fee should be attributed to their decision to watch a specific episode of Friends.
It is fascinating how the unions have to constantly adapt to the technology. But looking at the SAG-AFTRA guidelines, I have to push back on the fairness of this structure a little bit.
Okay, how so?
Well, I am looking at who is entitled to actually receive these residuals. The rulebook says, quote, all performers hired under or upgraded to a principal performer agreement.
Right.
That includes stunt performers, pilots, dancers, even puppeteers. But what about the background actors? If you're the person pouring coffee at Central Perk for 10 years, creating that iconic coffeehouse atmosphere, do you see any of this ongoing streaming revenue?
No.
You do not.
Wait, nothing? It's not a dime. And this is a really harsh reality of the industry. Background actors do not receive residuals. Unless they are officially given a line of dialogue or structurally upgraded to a principal performer by the director, their initial flat daily rate is all they will ever see.
That is brutal. You could be on screen in every single episode, physically standing right behind Jennifer Aniston, and while she is making $3 million a year in perpetuity, you walked away with a couple $100 a day back in 1996.
It perfectly illustrates the divide in the entertainment industry. The leverage you have when you sign the contract dictates the rest of your life.
Wow.
Which actually brings us to the only reason the 6 main cast members of Friends enjoy this residual structure today. They were not handed a 2% net profit deal out of the goodness of the studio's heart.
Oh, definitely.
They had to fight for it.
Yes. And this is where the story shifts from accounting to human psychology. Because getting that deal required an unprecedented level of solidarity. And that's not even the wildest part. Later in the episode, we will talk about the shocking twist involving what happens to this money when an actor passes away.
Yeah, you will not want to miss that.
But back to the solidarity watching. Friends today isn't just watching a 90s sitcom, it is really watching a masterclass in collective bargaining.
The context of the late 90s television landscape is so vital here. Network television was an absolute goldmine. A hit show was just printing money for the studio.
Right.
But according to an interview Jennifer Aniston gave, which was highlighted by TV Line, the cast bond was severely tested early on.
Right, because by season 2, the writers leaned heavily into the Ross and Rachel romance.
Oh, it was everywhere.
It became the central driving storyline of pop culture. And because of that outsized focus, the studio started paying Aniston and David Schwimmer way more money than Courtney Cox, Lisa Kudrow, Matthew Perry, and Matt LeBlanc.
And in almost any other Hollywood production, that pay disparity creates immediate resentment. It fractures the cast, and it gives the studio the upper hand in all future negotiations.
Divide and conquer.
Exactly.
But Aniston admitted that it just felt wrong. She said, and this is a quote, "It would have destroyed us, I think, if someone was soaring financially." She realized she wouldn't feel good going to work knowing she was making a greater amount for doing the exact same hours under the exact same lights as her friends.
So going into season 3, they made a historic, industry-shaking decision.
What did they do?
The 6 of them formed a united front. They entered contract negotiations together and basically told the network it was all of them or none of them. And to make the math work and actually achieve parity, Aniston and Schwimmer agreed to take a pay cut.
Taking a voluntary pay cut on the biggest show on television, that is virtually unheard of.
It was a massive short-term gamble,
Right.
but it gave them an impenetrable fortress of power for the long term.
Yeah.
By the time they were negotiating for seasons 9 and 10, that solidarity paid off exponentially. They secured an astonishing $1 million per episode.
It is hard to even fathom that. To put it in perspective, season 9 brought in $24 million for each cast member, and season 10 brought in $18 million.
Just for the acting salary.
Right. And when you combine those peak acting salaries with the 2% back-end deal they negotiated as a collective, Celebrity Net Worth estimates that each cast member has made around $153 million from the series.
And the emotional weight of that solidarity, it stuck with them forever. Matthew Perry wrote about this beautifully in his 2022 memoir.
Yeah, I remember reading that.
He explicitly praised Schwimmer's, quote, goodness and astute business sense. He acknowledged that Schwimmer's willingness to take that initial pay cut forced the 6 of them to take care of each other through what were incredibly stressful, high-stakes network negotiations.
It is so easy to assume that if you were the star of a hit show, you were just set for life. But Media Week recently pointed out a really tragic contrast to the Friends story.
Oh, with Dawson's Creek.
Yes. They highlighted the situation with James Van Der Beek, the star of Dawson's Creek, which was another massive era-defining hit.
Absolutely massive.
Yet after his passing, his family faced such financial instability that they had to rely on a public fundraiser just to secure their home.
It is a stark, truly heartbreaking reminder that visibility does not equal wealth. Being famous does not guarantee financial security or lucrative residual deals for your family. The Friends contract was an absolute anomaly, born entirely out of unshakable unity.
That context adds so much depth to Lisa Kudrow's recent Times of London interview. We focus a lot on the viral $20 million clickbait, but the core of that interview was actually doubly emotional.
It really was.
Following Matthew Perry's tragic passing in 2023 from the acute effects of ketamine, Kudrow finally sat down and rewatched the show.
But she hadn't done before, right?
Right. According to the coverage in Comic Basics and E! News, she admitted that for years she couldn't watch it. Or if she did, she would only look at her own performance, relentlessly picking apart her acting choices and just focusing on what she did wrong.
We're always our own worst critics.
Exactly. But watching it back after losing Matthew, she said she was finally able to step outside of her own head and just appreciate the sheer genius of the ensemble.
Wow.
She specifically noted how brilliant Aniston, Cox, Schwimmer, and LeBlanc were, but she reserved the absolute highest praise for Perry. She said his comedic timing and invention were, quote, just beyond us all.
It really highlights the duality of this whole story. On one hand, you have this cold, calculated machine of studio accounting and union rule books.
Right.
On the other, you have deeply human bonds forged in the fires of sudden, overwhelming fame.
It fundamentally changes the viewing experience. Every time you turn on Friends today, you aren't just watching 6 actors reading jokes. You are watching 6 people who genuinely protect each other behind the scenes. They are fiercely loyal, and that loyalty secured their legacies.
Yeah.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to connect this massive Hollywood story back to you, the listener, because you are an active participant in this. Every single time you click play on a streaming service or leave a rerun on the television while you go about your day, you are powering a massive ongoing economic ecosystem.
It's true.
Your viewership is the data point that triggers those SAG-AFTRA rules, calculates those gross revenues, feeds the studio overhead, and ultimately generates those $3 million annual checks. It is a powerful reminder that true leverage in any industry comes from knowing your precise value and standing in unwavering solidarity with your peers.
It is an ecosystem that outlasts the initial work by decades. The art might be frozen in the 1990s, but the financial mechanics operate in perpetuity.
Which brings us to a final, truly fascinating legal and philosophical twist derived from our research.
To do as we promised earlier.
Exactly. We consulted a newsletter from a Tucson elder law attorney regarding Matthew Perry's estate, and it opens up a wild concept. Under the law, residuals are considered personal property.
Right, like a car or a house.
Exactly. They are a tangible asset, no different than a stock portfolio. When an actor passes away, their right to receive those residuals, those millions of dollars generated year after year, does not vanish.
It becomes part of their estate.
Yes. Depending on how an actor plans their estate, those quarterly streaming checks could be passed down to specific beneficiaries, managed by a trust, donated to charity, or simply passed through state intestacy laws to next of kin.
That is incredible to think about.
It leaves you to ponder who inherits the financial legacy of a beloved character. Chandler Bing lives forever on our screens, immortalized in syndication. But the millions of dollars that Chandler continues to generate take on a completely new life long after the actor is gone.
So the block party never really ends.
The block party we talked about, it never ends. The tickets keep selling, the net profits keep flowing into a lockbox, but the person holding the key isn't the actor who stood under the studio lights. It is an estate, a trust, or a charity, quietly cashing checks for jokes delivered 30 years ago. Something to think about the next time you hear that iconic theme song. Stay tuned and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what's coming next.
You've been listening to Starscope Report, where Jordan and Jamie uncover the stories shaping Hollywood, music, and pop culture. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that keep the stars shining.